Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the Barbirolli Does Elgar box. Finally. Now, Barbirolli, was, as we all know, an extremely variable conductor, but he loved Elgar and did a lot of his best work in Elgar, and the vast majority of this stuff is fabulous. Let's just come straight out and say it. It is fabulous. All of it got remastered when the Giganto Barbirolli box was released, and I'm still going to do that at some point. It's just 111 CDs, and I have to take a deep breath. And there's some stuff I want to listen to before I, double check it and play around before I actually talk about it and make a fool of myself. So we have 7 CDs in here, and let us see. And it's original jackets. It's a nice booklet. Let's see what we got. And I'll tell you how wonderful it is, or isn't. All right, first, this is such a classic. The Cello Concerto with Jacqueline Dupre and the Sea Pictures with Janet Baker. Now, I have to confess, I like the Sea Pictures infinitely more than the Cello Concerto. Not that this isn't a great performance of it, it is. I just find the piece rather dull and uninteresting, even when Jacqueline Dupre is playing it and Barbirolli is, the two of them are panting and heaving in unison. I find it a rather uninteresting work. So that's me. That's my failing. It just hasn't struck me yet. I know other people love it and swear by it, and I'm completely unmoved by the biographical, sort of backstory to this whole thing. I mean, it's terrible what happened to Jacqueline Dupre. I mean, she had a form of multiple sclerosis. I have multiple sclerosis. I mean, my sister is completely paralyzed with multiple sclerosis. I understand multiple sclerosis and the tragedy that represented for her. So in that respect, I'm entirely sympathetic. But really, from a purely musical point of view, this is a great performance of, I think, a relatively uninteresting work. But the Sea Pictures, oh, wow, with Baker, those are just fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And the last song, I can't help it. It's got the same tune as "Hello, Dolly." Ya da 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 da, hello, Dolly. We're so nice to have you back. Well, sort of, kind of, sort of. I just listen to it and sort of get a chuckle. But what a beautiful song cycle it is. And Where Corals Lie. Oh my God, that's so beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. So I think it's one of the great records ever made, and I even acknowledge that about the Cello Concerto, even though I never listened to it and couldn't care less. But that's me. Like I said, you may feel differently, and I have to give credit where credit is due. Next, all right, we have the Enigma Variations, the Serenade, the Introduction and Allegro, and the Coquena Overture. Now, I just talked about the Introduction and Allegro because it's on Barbirolli's English Music for Strings disc. So that goes without saying, is absolutely magnificent. Serenade is very, very nicely done too, even though I think it's a rather pale and uninteresting work. The Enigma Variations. Okay, there are so many great recordings of the Enigma Variations now that I think this one has lost some of its luster. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a very beautiful traditional enigma, and it's with the Philharmonia, and there's nothing not to like about it. There really isn't. I just find other performances more compelling and more modern sound, particularly. But this is very, very good. And the Coquena Overture is really surpassed only by Gibson. Gibson's disc on Chandos that I talked about is the ultimate Elgar Overture disc, and it really is. The sound is so great. The performance is so insane. The trombone playing is unbelievable, and the big climaxes. Barbirolli does a very good job with it, but he doesn't quite get there. So, yeah, I mean, for what they are, they're very good. They really are, but they have been surpassed, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that. Next, Elgar First Symphony with the Philharmonia, and Pomp and Circumstance Marches 1 and 4. Now, this is the reference recording for Elgar's First. Always has been, always was. It is stunning, and it's particularly effective in the finale, which can seem very disjointed and kind of like, almost an appendix to the rest of the work. I have problems with the First Symphony. I have to confess. I find the Adagio to be rather dull, and I love the first movement. And when the finale is played the way Barbirolli does here, it's just magnificent. It's absolutely unabashedly romantic, but at the same time, completely unaffected. And that's why it works so well, because it's so heartfelt and intense and sincere. And the slow movement in this performance, for me, it just goes like the wind. It's just wholly beautiful, sensitive and passionate and just true. It's like the musical embodiment of truth in tones, this performance. I can't think of a more perfect one. I don't think it's been equaled. I really don't. There have been other excellent performances of the first, but this one is truly, truly special. And it's, again, the Philharmonia, and they play wonderfully, and it's just great. Then we get Elgar Symphony Number 2 and Falstaff. Well, Falstaff was not on this. It's somewhere else. That's the original jacket here. But Symphony Number 2. Symphony Number 2, unfortunately, features the Halle. And the Halle just was such a not great orchestra for its entire career under Barbirolli. That isn't to say it didn't do good things. He was so loyal to them. They were basically a community orchestra. They were not world-class at any point, but he stuck by them. He made records with them, and this was a piece they felt very passionately and very strongly about. And I understand that. But there are things that just don't come off. I mean, the big climax in the third movement in the scherzo with the tambourine banging and the whole, it's just not there. And, whatever you say about, how much they cared, they just didn't have the guts, the cojones, to give Elgar what he wanted throughout the piece. I mean, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, or the flesh is willing, but I don't know. Well, you know how that's, however that saying goes. They want to do it, but they just can't get there, and it's a pity. It's really a pity because the conception is quite effective, and I think that, Barbirolli had a great Mahler, Elgar too, in him, but this is not it. Unfortunately, it's the Achilles heel of his Elgar recordings. Then we have, Pomp and Circumstance 1 and 5, but that's not what's on here, and Froissart and the Elegy and Suspiri. Well, those are here. So here we get the rest of Pomp and Circumstance, numbers 2, 3, and 5. Now, there's nothing wrong with these performances, but the sonics are rather pale. They really are. They've just been better recorded. Barbirolli's pacing is unerring, and the interpretation is such as they are. I mean, their marches is just fine, but they have like no the bass is tubby and they just don't have a lot of amplitude. And then we get Suspiri and the Elegy, which we also talked about on the English string music disc, which are gorgeous, and Falstaff. Now, Falstaff is also with the Halle. This is not so much of a problem, I don't think, because Falstaff is kind of a gruffer piece. I don't particularly like Falstaff either, to tell you the truth. I mean, some of you have talked about it as the greatest thing since sliced bread. And again, I don't deny that. I truly don't. For those of you who are, into this sort of thing, that's fine with me. I just find it dull. I mean, and thematically rather uninteresting, especially the opening. It's supposed to be Falstaff, It just gets on my nerves. It has wonderful moments, like everything Elgar wrote, but and it's a major work. It's a very major work. Some people consider it to be his greatest orchestral work entirely, and I may get there. I mean, I'm willing to listen to it until I'm convinced. So far, I'm not. Barbirolli's recording of it, however, is unquestionably one of the greatest, if not the greatest. It's absolutely seamless. I mean, again, you don't have to like something to be able to acknowledge that it's fabulous, especially when it comes to the question of performance and interpretation. I mean, as a professional, such as I pretend to be, I'm supposed to be able to do that. It's not about what I like. It's about what they do and how it sounds. And what they do is marvelous, and it sounds terrific. Even with the Halle, this is the performance, I think, where they really just give their all. And if they could have been at this level when they did the Second Symphony, we would have been having a different conversation entirely. So there you go. And finally, what do we have here? The Dream of Geritol. Yes. the Dream of Gerontius, along with some bits of other stuff here with Halle. We've got Dream Children, the Andante, and one Bavarian dance, and a couple excerpts from Caractacus, which are frankly negligible. It doesn't matter. Now, the Dream of Gerontius is the most fabulous music allied to the most horrid text in the world. I mean, first of all, I am completely out of sympathy with the doctrinaire message of Cardinal Newman's poem. It's all about happy suffering. Oh, happy suffering soul, and your pleasant, pleasurable pain, and it's grotesque. I just can't deal with that. I really can't. And people have taken me to task because of that. They've said I'm like anti-Christian, which is nonsense. I'm anti-bad poetry, is what I am. There are plenty of ways to embody Christian doctrine without making the poetry absolutely mawkish and horrible. Oh, it's horrible. I mean, the Demons Chorus, that's the only part I like because it's low-born clods of brute earth. I love that line. But, it's hark upon my ears comes an uncouth dissonance which would make me fear ere could I yet be affrighted, and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just bad. Really bad. I can't listen to it and read the text because I just get so disgusted with the text. But the music is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I guess that makes me not a true Elgarian. I happen to think that the Apostles is 10 times better. I really like the Apostles, and I have no problem with the words, which are biblical. Anyway, but who's in here? Oh, what a great cast. Janet Baker, Richard Lewis, Kim Borg, the Halle Choir, the Sheffield Philharmonic Choir, the Ambrosian Singers, the Halle Orchestra, Barbirolli. Again, it's one of the triumphs of Barbirolli's tenure in Halle. He really got them to give 110%, and I think it's just a great performance. And if it isn't perfect, if it has its rough edges, they only help. They work in this piece. You don't want it to be too smooth, because then it just becomes boring. And one thing this never is boring. So I think it's just a terrific performance of a very problematic work. And I know that, Elgar and his crew thought that Cardinal Newman's poem was just, the acme of poetic fabulosity. And I can't deal with it. It's a shame, because I love the music. It's like Parsifal, actually. I feel the same way about Parsifal. The music is glorious. The words are just atrocious. And, there's a lot of music where that's the case. There really is. And so you just learn to deal with it. And I have learned to deal with it over the centuries. I really have. I can now enjoy my Dream of Gerontius and not worry what they're singing about. And as we all do with so many pieces in foreign languages, where if they were translated into English, we would probably be rolling on the floor laughing. So it's okay. It's really okay. And that's the Barbirolli set. It is really possibly, taken in toto, and never mind my own feelings about specific works, the finest thing he ever did as his, in terms of his view of a single composer, and the quality that he achieved and the level of consistency that he maintained. Only that Second Symphony falls below, I think, the very, very highest standard. Otherwise, you just can't do better. And this, like I said, all comes from the remastered box. It's going to sound as good as it's going to sound. Some of it was great, some of it was less great, but who cares? A wonderful memento to a tremendous conductor, and at very, very cheap price. Grab it while you can, especially if you didn't get the big box. I mean, it's absolutely mandatory, standard stuff for anybody who cares about this composer or this conductor. So, keep on listening, friends. Thank you for joining me. Take care.